I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Do you like donuts? Burger King likes donuts. Warren Buffett likes donuts. Stacy?
It's Warren, tax me more Buffett, Max Keiser. Remember last year he was saying that the rich are winning the class war, and that in fact he invited the government to tax him more because he pays less in taxes than his secretary does. And of course, he is behind this big merger between Burger King, the second largest burger seller in America, and Tim Hortons, which is the largest coffee and donut seller in Canada. Now, what this is all about is a tweet from Stacy, LOL. Now Burger King wants to drop its U.S. passport and become a free healthcare-loving Canadian. So this is one of these tax inversion deals whereby they're no longer have to pay or be subject to the U.S. tax, which is 40%. The Canadian tax is 26.5%.
Yeah, this is really a big story in the financial press. Warren Buffett financing this Burger King takeover of Tim Hortons, the Canadian donut shop chain, to avoid U.S. taxes. And I immediately thought back to the 1960s, where you had a lot of young men leaving America to go to Canada to avoid fighting in the Vietnam War. Here in the 2014 era, we have people who want to avoid paying for those wars, because half of America tax goes to the Pentagon, goes to the defense budget to start these wars of convenience, to continue the American empire around the world. But Warren Buffett, of course, doesn't want to have to pay for those wars, so he's fleeing to Canada. So these are financial, cowards.
Let's talk about this more specifically. Warren Buffett has paid for $3 billion of the $11 billion cost of the takeover. He, in exchange, gets preferred shares for that. Now, Burger King itself was 70% owned by 3G, which is a private equity firm. The other bits of it were owned by Bill Ackman's Pershing Square. So, it's mostly private equity owned. Americans themselves, they don't care. They're still like, this is an American company, we love it, we're patriots, we're going to consume here. But the other thing is, you mentioned the tax. Back in the 1960s, the government revenue here in the U.S. was about 20% from corporate tax rates. Now it's just about 10%. So here, even that share, though, all these American corporations, Burger King is very much associated with the American brand, that they are fleeing America just when patriotism is rising here.
The Burger King shop was bought out by private equity, and then it was relisted as a public stock offering. And of course, the private equity is fueled by ultra-low interest rates from a compliant Fed that is on beck and call from the oligarchs in America to lend them money at near 0%, or in some cases at under 0%, a negative interest rate. They kind of spruced up the Burger King franchise, took it public, again taking advantage of stock buybacks and earnings fraud and market manipulation. Now, to add insult to injury to the Americans that are putting up good money to fight these wars and sending soldiers off to fight these wars, apparently to defend democracy and freedom. No. Warren Buffett, the financial coward, is saying, let's go to Canada and avoid paying for these wars so that we can take advantage of the Montreal Canadiens, the maple syrup, and all the benefits of being up there.
Now, I might say that 52% of fast food workers are already on some sort of welfare from the taxpayers of America, whether it's food stamps or Medicaid. And the other thing, of course, is that the likes of Burger King are massively subsidized by the likes of the corn subsidies, the agricultural subsidies. So, they've benefited from that. And on top of that, like I said in a previous show, it's these sort of huge corporations that have really lobbied the most for the tax code being so complicated.
Right, I mean, the corn subsidy, I think, is another interesting angle to how oligarchs become oligarchs. In America, since something like 60% of all the food eaten by the average American is high fructose corn syrup, which increases enormous the cost of healthcare in America, the diabetes epidemic out of control, but it's all subsidized by the federal government because they underwrite agriculture in America, the corn crop in America, so that places around other countries can't compete, specifically Africa and other places who are left holding, the bag. And so once again, here you have Warren Buffett. He gets free money from the Fed. He gets subsidy from the corn industry. he gets to do a deal with private equity that is, again, underwritten by the federal government and the tax code and market manipulation to take all of his tax dollars to Canada because he doesn't want to pay for the wars that this administration started.
Warren Buffett himself has made clear that Berkshire Hathaway is going to pay U.S. taxes on their gains from this deal and their preferred shares. It's the private equity of 3G and Pershing Square who don't want to pay the U.S. taxes, and Burger King now will no longer be a U.S. company. But now, you mentioned suicide consumption, and that takes me to the next headline, where I'm thinking, well, you know, Americans are, it's just more and more is personal income tax, which is paying for the wars that Americans love, okay? They do love it, and they love all sorts of corporations, including this now Canadian corporation of Burger King, which they don't mind subsidizing. So how are they going to generate more income? And I thought a really good way to combine all of this sort of police state, suicide consumption, and all that comes in this headline from ITV. Suicide tourism numbers double in 4 years, researchers find. So suicide tourism is on the rise. Experts said after they found that the number of people traveling to Switzerland to take their own lives had doubled in 4 years. Now, 1 in 5 of those are Brits, but I thought, you know, here America really specializes in suicide by cop, and this could be some sort of a tourism. You know, the posters over in Europe, in fact, at Heathrow, they could say, don't go to Switzerland where they're just going to give you a little tiny, thing of chocolate syrup that you drink and it's going to be so quiet. Go out spectacular. Go out in a hail of bullets in New York City or Chicago or Detroit or LA.
Assisted suicide or euthanasia is a growth industry. You say 20% are Brits. That's completely understandable. I would expect that number to quadruple. As the rain continues unabated. It's the coldest August in history. So the number of Brits going to Switzerland to Dignitas and other euthanasia clinics set to surge, and that's completely understandable, and I understand that. But as far as the rest of the economy goes, you've got a business model where you disenfranchise folks, you engorge them with high fructose corn syrup to the point where the logical way for them to play out their life is to simply get injected with death chemicals. And in America, though, as you point out, they just like to throw themselves in front of a hail of bullets from the police. So this is the way they do it in America.
And now you know how everybody in America, they're either in fast food working or retail sector, but they're also providing like Uber jobs. People are like driving others as part of their income way. And part of this police state, I thought, in 1972, there were only 230,000 Americans in prison. Now we have 2.3 million Americans in prison. And this could be combined with Airbnb. This is another way to possibly make money, is like you rent out a room in your house to be a prison. You could be a warden. Basically, that's your sort of job.
What about suicide donuts?
Suicide donuts, but in this case, in the idea of being like Airbnb, you're a hotelier for the night. Here, Uber, you're a taxi driver for the day. And you could also you could be a prison warden. That's a good job. That's, you could possibly do that.
So it's prison warden for a day. So it's a social networking enabled P2P disruptor of the prison business where anyone can be a euthanasia clinic in prison by the day, and they can feed them the suicide donut. So Tim Horton, as you mentioned, in Dignitas, they have a chocolate liquid apparently that does the deed. Well, why not just fill donuts with that chocolate liquid and have suicide donuts? You can serve at your home and do like an Uber model or an Airbnb model for the enterprising home suicide clinic / prison operator and disrupt the prison and suicide clinic business. So put both Corrections Corps of America and Dignitas out of business with this new business model.
And in fact, I'll tie them all together. And another remarkable story we've learned since being here is that we noticed in our hotel room a life alert, a big giant button on the floor underneath the desk. And we asked the manager of the hotel what this is about. And apparently it's because of that Dominic Strauss-Kahn, former IMF guy, allegedly or possibly or whatever, attacked some woman in a hotel here. And all the unions here got them to have to impose into every single room in the hotels here this life alert for the maids if they're possibly attacked by people. That's a great deal for somebody who sold that contract.
Well, I'm not clear. Is it because of the alleged rape of Dominic Strauss-Kahn that the hotels are putting in this panic button in all the rooms? Or is it because he's a central banker?
Exactly.
Because you have Janet Yellen, you have Ben Bernanke, you have Christine Lagarde. You have the big-time bankers in New York and London. And if you see one on the street, if you see one in your hotel room, You should be able to hit a panic button and say, my God, there's a banking alleged rapist in my room who's going to commit quantitative easing all over my face. I need to stop this effluent from gagging me with all this QE. Help, 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 hit the panic button. Help, quantitative easing.
And now, tying this all together, including to the UK, which is the previous empire to the American empire, I thought this was a remarkable sentence. Actually, it's from the Globe and Mail, a Canadian paper, so it makes sense that we're talking about this as Burger King becomes Canadian. State trooper suspended as naked incidents increase in the US. A Maryland state police trooper has been put on administrative suspension after sheriff's deputies responded to a call reporting a naked man drinking at a bar in a barbecue restaurant. The sentence that struck me is the following: the incident is the most recent in a spate involving naked people around the United States.
Yes, yes. I think I know what this is all about. Again, going back to the 1960s, if you remember the garbage men down in South, there's an enormous bee about to land. Oh my God. It could have been one of those drones from the Pentagon spying on us again.
This naked thing, this naked...
Yeah, I know why, though, because you see, the problem is now that people are so caught up in this idea that they're going to be replaced by robots, that they want to prove that they're human. We talked about this on the last show. It reminds me of going back to the 1960s where the protest, I am a man, the garbage men down in I forget what state, Alabama maybe, they came out, I am a man, as part of the civil rights movement. Now people are just getting buck naked. And they're saying, I'm not a robot, I'm a human being. Look at my naked flesh. This is a protest of the humanity against the robots and the Daleks. The Daleks, they fear the Daleks.
Well, I mean, we noticed this in the UK, and you've brought this up, I think it was to, in fact, Russell Brand, that we see this across the UK often is people always have to protest naked. That's the only way they're
on
comfortable.
their way to the suicide clinic, and that's a British experience. Get naked, ride a bicycle, go to the suicide clinic, and eat a chocolate suicide donut. Stacey, we gotta go. Thanks for being, again, so beautiful.
I'm gonna go get some donuts now, Max.
That's beautiful. Don't go away. Stay right there. Much more coming your way.
I'm Abby Merton. The stories we cover here, you're not going to hear anywhere else.
Another big story that mainstream headlines seem to have
There's a
missed.
reason they don't want you to know.
Nothing in the report detailing the reason.
We should all be completely outraged.
Now let's break the set.
To what extent do you think the American and British policies in the Middle East have contributed to the creation of this indeed very terrifying terrorist group?
The Western governments have fully understood that their policies have contributed significantly to the radicalization of young men and women around the world. This is without a shadow of a doubt. I will confirm with that, I would agree with that some of the young men that we work with certainly have been radicalized because of Western foreign policy.
General, what do you make of all this? Rocky, these creeps are total scumbag jihadis, led by the Baghdadi of Iraqi baddies, Bakar al-Baghdadi. I heard he's 80 times eviler than Osama bin Laden. Probably. So which tyrant is giving these lunatics weaponry? Well, remember how in 2003 we liberated Iraq, then armed the Iraqi army after we finished destroying the Iraqi army with our army? Yes. The arms we armed the Iraqi army with couldn't defend the Iraqis and got hijacked as ISIS armaments. So now we're dropping our bombs to bomb the bombs we gave to them Iraqis to make Iraq safe, to make Iraqis safe again.
When we come to talk about addiction to cigarettes, we understand quite clearly that there is either smoking or not smoking. We believe completely in abstinence. I can't quite understand why we don't have the same belief for drugs or alcohol. To me, the only way to productively beat dependency is to give up drugs altogether.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Trace Mayer. a leading monetary expert on Bitcoin and gold. Trace, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thanks, Max. Great to be here.
Of course, people know your name and they really followed you through Bitcoin. You're one of the early adopters, one of the people that have really been, I guess, an early investor as well. So you're part of this whole redefinition of monetary policy. Bitcoin, people talk about Bitcoin, hedge funds are now in Bitcoin, but what I want to talk to you about today, Trace, is geopolitics and Bitcoin. This is a topic that has not been discussed really, and it looks as though we're heading into a global, almost financial war, and Bitcoin could change this war in a fundamental way. Speak a little bit about it.
Yeah, so we've got a financial crisis. It's moving to the economic, the social, the political, the geopolitical, and all of the nations that they've kind of seen this coming down the pipeline. It's not like they're dumb. They've got very intelligent people in their intelligence services and their strategy and their planning. But where Bitcoin has kind of changed the game is that everybody's analyzed the situation, come up with their strategy, with their plans, and then this new technology comes on the scene, and it disrupts the entire chessboard.
Right,
the rules of the game have changed now.
Right. So before Bitcoin, there was a kind of a inevitability to U.S. dollar hegemony, U.S. dollar ruling the world, status quo continuing. Bitcoin came along, and first it was laughed at, I would say, for the most part. Suddenly it's become a big thing. But correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true that if like a country like Russia wanted to really stick it to the U.S., they could move $100 billion onto Bitcoin and take it completely outside of the purview of the United States and run an enormous advantage in this geopolitical paradigm that we see now?
Yeah, I mean, throughout all of history, if everybody's fighting with bronze weapons and you develop a new technology of steel, you're going to have a vast competitive advantage against your adversaries. Bitcoin at its heart is a new technology. And that is a big, big deal. And so it really surprises me that one of these nation states hasn't decided, you know what, we're going to pick up this new weapon and gut the Federal Reserve with it.
Okay.
Or maybe the Federal Reserve will use it and be able to even further get a larger lead on its geopolitical rivals. The tax havens are really the ones who are kind of sniffing this out first. Isle of Man, Netherlands, Singapore, they're being very friendly towards Bitcoin, probably in response to FACTA.
Okay, I'll talk about FACTA in a second, but I want to stick on this war theme. You're just hearing you speak there for a moment. I mean, it brings back these images of World War I. It started out on horseback and ended up with airplanes and bombers. World War II kind of picked up with the airplanes and bombers and ended up with atomic weapons. So here we are in World War III. So first of all, are we in a world war? And is it fair to say that it's starting off with these very crude financial weapons like sanctions, but it could go and end up with whoever wins the Bitcoin war? Because if I can move 100 billion or more on a Bitcoin on the blockchain, that's an enormous financial war advantage, correct?
Yeah, I totally agree. World War I, before that, war was between monarchies and like professional militaries, and it wasn't really with the average citizen. And then World War I and World War II, you had gas, and the U.S. nuked a bunch of people in Japan. It occupied Germany as a result, still occupying Germany, and the whole nature of warfare changed. And I think we're seeing it now also. It's really a war on the individual. It was Peter Lachter 42 years ago, 18-year-old kid got shot trying to escape the Berlin Wall. And it made it apparent that the Berlin Wall was there to keep people in, not to keep people out. And so likewise, we're seeing crony capitalists, we're seeing the bankers, the politicians, all being protected by the police. Tear gassing people in Ferguson, looking at everything about us at the airports.
Let me jump in here for a second. So you make an interesting point there. So going back historically, wars were professional soldiers and professional...
And citizens were left out of it.
Right, and the civilians were kind of left out. But throughout the ensuing decades, it's become the civilian populations are the ones that are being targeted more and more, and the soldiers are mercenaries, they're professional soldiers, what have you, but they're kind of technocrats. But it's the civilian population that's in a line of fire. So in this new world war, you're saying that it's really the entire machinery of corruption versus the individual.
Yes, and that's mainly what this war on terrorism is all about. A very amorphous, undefined enemy that at the heart of it is just an individual. Osama bin Laden personified it.
Right, so you have this state machinations along with the corporate powers are ganging up essentially on the individual. The individual has, of course, now the blockchain has Bitcoin to defend themselves. You mentioned FACTA. FACTA is a new tax policy that the U.S. is trying to impose around the world. A lot of people are not talking about it. What is it? Why is it, in your view, I guess, a bad thing?
Yeah, well, the U.S. persons, they have to report all their foreign bank accounts, they have to report all their foreign financial assets. There are a bunch of these tax information exchange agreements that have been signed between the U.S. and a bunch of other countries. So it's really eroding these financial privacy rights. And it's all kind of premised that there is a central third party that you can exert that force or control on, which the blockchain disintermediates. So it's very exciting, as the state is really pushing for this complete hegemony over all of our daily activities in our life, we get technology and tools that are immune to violence. Because cryptography, it doesn't matter how much violence, it's not going to solve the math problem. And so individuals can pick that up. Instead of having your right to an unreasonable search and seizure defined in the Fourth Amendment, you can just define it mathematically with something like TrueCrypt or PGP.
All right, you're talking about the inherent mathematical qualities of Bitcoin. So let's digress a bit into this, because the value of Bitcoin comes from math. I mean, this is what I think people don't fully embrace. But there is the cryptology, which is the underlying framework of value of the Bitcoin and the blockchain. And so what you're saying is that this is unimpeachable, uncorruptible. You cannot corrupt math, whereas you can corrupt J.P. Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, when Nicholas Copernicus came out with the heliocentric theory, it stood on its own. It didn't matter if you threw Galileo in house arrest. It's one of the reasons that the Founding Fathers laid up an equity-based monetary system in the U.S. with gold and silver, and not a debt-based one like this Federal Reserve note that we have. It's because it's much more solid financially. And likewise, math, it doesn't matter. Congress can't pass a law that says 2 + 2 = 7. All that'll do is create a bunch of unintended effects because everybody's going to have to work around it.
Right, so the value proposition for Bitcoin is there, and it's going to be with us now going forward. You cannot undo it. You cannot uninvent Bitcoin. You can't go backwards in time. You brought up the Copernicus example or Galileo. Once these things are discovered or once they're talked about, you can't go back. They're here with us.
Yeah, when the longbow came on the scene, a different technology, it altered Europe because the knights no longer had all the power vesting in them. Bitcoin decentralizes the private keys of wealth to individuals away from third parties. If individuals are willing to hold and secure their own private keys, which is one of the reasons I funded Armory, the Bitcoin wallet, because it's the most secure and people can run the software on any computer that they build. It's open source, it's free. So it's like, here's the tool. Take your private keys away from the centralized third parties. Don't let them hypothecate and rehypothecate your assets. Know exactly what you own. Take control of it mathematically.
Right, now you write that the big problem today is that value and price are completely severed. Ownership of assets is unknown. So this is part of this whole idea that you have that price and value are now divorced. They don't equal the same thing anymore. The price of a treasury bond, an American treasury bond, what does it mean anymore if the system is run out of the Federal Reserve Bank and the Federal Reserve Bank is run by monetary lunatics, essentially?
Yeah, well, Alan Greenspan, gold is the ultimate form of payment. It's the settlement currency. But what have they done? Alan Greenspan testified twice before Congress that central banks stand ready to lease gold in increasing quantities should the price rise. They carry gold in the vault, gold out on loan is the same line item, cash, accounts receivable, we know they're not the same thing. We're seeing an environment where the price of the assets being suppressed, not supported, not by users, but by owners, and not for the obvious reasons. It's to interfere with the interest rates. It's to interfere with the pricing mechanism of, half of all the transactions. And so we don't know what things should cost. We don't know what a barrel of oil should cost, or what a minstrel warship should cost, or what our suit should cost, or our food. And as these food prices go up, social, political, geopolitical crises. The Arab Spring, was it really the Tunisian kid selling fruit that lit himself on fire that started it, or was it food prices going up
Right,
and people not being able to eat?
Historically, when the price of food gets to 40% of discretionary income, there's usually some kind of revolt. We saw that in the French Revolution. We saw it in Tunisia. And so this is, again, the separation between price and value. And if you are in the business of manipulating the gold price, as we know now, without any question, that's being forced down all these years now, it takes away the only yardstick you have to figure out what everything else in the economy should be worth. And if you remove all value and remove all yardsticks of value, then you end up with a dictatorship who says what's valuable and not valuable. So America's become kind of a, Janet Yellen is like a dictator in a lot of ways.
Well, she's dictating the price of what money should be.
Right.
And, when you're going down this road, there's either repression or regeneration. You brought up the French Revolution, let them eat cake, the burnout part in the bottom of the kettle. And they actually made it illegal to use gold and silver in transactions. That's what precipitated the reign of terror. Dragging out all the political elites, like guillotining them. That's what happens when you push people far enough. And, in a hypothecation nation in the U.S. where everything has been pledged as collateral against law, and where law is really just a way for people to consume other people, it's supposed to protect these individual rights. That's how it gets the ideological support of the populace. But it's increasingly losing that. They're on increasingly shaky ground financially. The U.S. really has to go the road of regeneration, of allowing Bitcoin to thrive and the innovation, or they're just not going to have the tools, and they're not going to have the most advanced technology and the most advanced military and the world reserve currency and all of these things. Because the U.S. is a very powerful force, but it's only powerful because of all of this pricing ability that they've got to perform economic calculation.
I want to actually, if you could stick around, do another segment with you to kind of pick up on this. We've got about 30 seconds left here. Quick comment on New York's bit license.
Oh yeah, they're just trying to stifle innovation, and so they're going to lose dominance in the financial scene.
Right. Okay, we're going to pick up on that when we come back for another segment. But anyway, for this segment, Chase, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Max.
All right, we'll be back with Chase in another part of this interview, but for now, it's Max Keiser saying goodbye for the Keiser Report. On behalf of Stacy Herbert and myself, if you want to try to find us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Bye, y'all.